Hello, guten Tag, und grüß Gott. Today is February the 6th, 2022, and we're marching right along into the new year, and things are happening all over the place. So this video, I think I'm going to title it Machine Shop 2, but actually I'm going to start with what's going on in the world today. And for that, I'm going to use my my reference material, which is the Wall Street Journal. And then I have also someone else that is very well versed on current events, and that is my wife, Marge. She's actually here in the background, keeping an eye on me so that I don't say anything untoward, and she can perhaps correct me right without even having to edit the video. So yeah, I invited her here to help me with this. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is that I recently got hearing aids, and simply, my professional career, started in the steel mills basically, and then went from the steel mills to power plants, and those are all places, with a lot of noise. And so it turns out that I've lost a good portion of my high-end, high-frequency ability to hear. And how that manifests is that in crowded rooms or in restaurants or so, I really can't discern what's happening in terms of conversation and so forth. And so a lot of times I just didn't participate. So finally, my wife has been on me for years, to, hey, do something about your hearing. And I guess I didn't take too seriously her advice on this, because she noticed that when we were watching television together, she had to turn up the volume so that, I could actually hear it. And then I got kind of tired of asking her to turn up the volume. And so I just kind of sat there and ignored it. And, and then asked her, hey, what happened? What did they say? So anyway, that's how life went on. And finally, I don't know what made me decide that is, I guess, I just couldn't hear very well. Decided to do something about my hearing. So I just went to my doctor. I said, hey, I got to do something about my hearing. Primary care physician, Dr. Miley Creamer. Anyway, so she sent me to what they call an ENT, which is
ear, nose, and throat.
Ear, nose, and throat specialist. And so they tested me, and I got a graph, that showed the high that my half of my hearing for that chart was normal, in the normal area, but the other half, which is the high frequency half, really went downhill. And while I could still hear it, but definitely not at the volume required to keep conversations alive and that kind of thing. So they said, well, we have the cure. So the best, what you need is hearing aids, and we'll fit them for you, and they will be nicely done and so forth. And so anyway, and they said, so you have three choices. The low choice of the hearing aids are $4,000 and some dollars. That's our low-end hearing aids. Then there's the mid-range, which is $5,000 or $6,000. And then there's the Cadillac, which is $9,000 a pair, 9,000 and some, And I said, does the insurance cover this? And they said, well, normally not. Okay. So I discussed this with my wife, and I said, oh, shit. But, they did say something. And what they said was that, hearing loss can cause dementia. And that had me a little bit concerned. And I said, well, wait a minute. How can it cause dementia? That just didn't compute how hearing loss and dementia, is related. And so evidently what happens is if you don't hear well, a bunch of neurons in your brain become inactive because you're ignoring it. Also, you're starting to lip read. And so there's less brain activity and more in the visual cortex, that's so I'm not sure whether that's a really great explanation, but this is what they gave me. So that kind of had me worried. I go to breakfast with my engineering friends, that we do about once a month. And I said, hey, I'm having trouble hearing. They all had trouble hearing. In fact, they all had hearing aids. And so the guy next to me says, you know what? The best hearing aids actually at Costco. I said, what? Yeah. He said, these guys want like almost $10,000 from me to get a hearing aid. He said, oh, that's bullshit, So anyways, I go to Costco. To make a long story short, that they give me the same damn test. I look at the charts, it's the same kind of analysis. And they say, well, our hearing aids, there's a flat rate for it. You don't have any other choice. The hearing aids that we have, which are comparable to $9,000 hearing aids, they're the same technology and everything. They're for $1,800. What about that, huh? And then they said something key, and they said, and you know what? What kind of insurance do you have? I said, well, I have Aetna PPO through my wife. And they said, ha, Aetna, they will give you a reimbursement, maybe as much as $600 or so. So anyway, fast forward, I got my hearing aids, and I don't have my hearing aids in right now, but I will wear them sometime, and you won't even notice because they're kind of hidden behind the ear, and so forth. So it's something. The next video, I will not forget to wear them, which is what I did this time. But so that's the story of the hearing aids.
Well, what did Aetna say, and what did your insurance say?
Well, yeah, so I have insurance through the Edison Company, which is United Healthcare, and then Aetna through my wife, who retired from BP. They don't like to be called British Petroleum. They like to be called BP. Every time that I say BP, I'm reminded of the Blue Horizon disaster, for Christ's sakes, and it cost them, BP dollars, lots of dollars. And our tax, our stock, we had a bunch of stock through March, and that, of course, tanked, She had stock options to buy that stock at $74, and by the time we could exercise the options, it tanked down to about 20 or something like that.
And now oil's $90 a barrel, and the stock still isn't doing very well.
No, for some reason, BP doesn't have their act together yet, but there are some glimmers of hope because, we hear that they have the grand design of putting in electric charging stations in England and, maybe some other countries. So this is a really old company. It's several hundred years old. Well, maybe not several hundred, over 100 for sure, because they actually they were part of the Dutch oil company, and then the Trans Middle Eastern Railroad Company, which was actually a German company, which is the genesis, of BP. So they have a long and rich history, and they're right there in the middle. Their office, which Marge visited in London, is right there by St. James Park, which is, well, hoity-toity, kind of an area. Anyway, so much for BP and hearing aids and etc. So where are we with the news? And I have my Wall Street Journal here, and I'm just going to go over some of the things that I've kind of earmarked, and that is the tensions shadow Olympic athletes. And right now, the Olympics are going on. The Winter Olympics are going on in Beijing or someplace near Beijing, up in the mountainside. Because they do have a winter over there in China. It's not hot everywhere. And the tensions, really are about, the athletes are leaving their cell phones home because they worry about spying. And Nancy Pelosi said, hey, don't talk about politics and their human rights abuses if you do, if you want to get along. And then, of course, the athletes are concerned, that, some of the athletes that are kind of shoe-in winners because they're really good, like Shaun White and so forth, that you might expect to be obvious gold medal winners. And if they're competing against some Chinese star, they can always say, well, you got COVID, I mean, here's the test, we can't let you compete. So the Chinese are holding all the cards. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Now, and I'm going to hold this up because this is how the athletes were greeted in China. And, these guys in hazmat suits, saying, welcome to China. Oh, God, to Beijing. Anyway, yeah, so that's what's going on there. And so they're kind of concerned all over the place. Now, here's an interesting kind of a tidbit, that I picked up in the Wall Street Journal. It says VR to ER. So evidently, the metaverse early adopters, and I should be in that group because I do have a VR set and I haven't used it yet. Oh my God. But anyway, metaverse early adopters proved to be accident prone. So evidently, they're going into the VR world, and if they live in a small place, they're knocking shit over, and they're, getting getting hurt. That's kind of interesting. So that's coming right along there. So what else is new? Well, China and Putin had a summit, and of course, the United States and a bunch of other nations, but not all of the Western nations, have boycotted China during the Olympics. They're not sending a diplomatic mission or anything like this, but the athletes, of course, can go. We're not going to repeat the thing, that what happened with Jimmy Carter back in the 80s, so where we just didn't let the athletes compete. That was such a disaster, because the Russians were in Afghanistan. Give me a break. Of course, we went to Afghanistan. And did the Russians not come to ours? Yes, they did. Anyway, so Putin and Xi, they got together, and you know what? They're aligning themselves against the United States, and all of the NATO nations. The Chinese, the Russians sought the support of the Chinese for non-expansion of the NATO, which would include the Ukraine, and this is basically what they're objecting to. They don't want NATO at their doorstep because NATO, of course, as we talked last time, was established, to protect the western part of Europe from the Russians, and so they didn't want that right next to their border. So, it makes sense. Anyway, so now Xi is going along with Russia against the United States, and basically what they're saying is the Russians saying, well, U.S., you're not the only superpower. If we align with China, there's another superpower. And China, so here the headlines scream, that Biden deploys 3,000 troops in response to Russia's moves. And those troops are being 3,000. Of course, the Russians have 140,000 amassed at their border. What the hell is 3,000? They better have 300,000 drones or something. I don't know what's going on there. So, most recently, what we have here is ISIS leader kills himself. Okay, so the ISIS leader in Syria was attacked by special forces, and because we wanted to take him out, to slow down the ISIS mischief down there. And as the U.S. forces moved in, and I guess he heard the helicopters and everything, he had the place rigged for bombs, and he killed himself and a bunch of women and children along with him. So one less ISIS leader. I'm not sure about that. Makes a hell of a lot of difference. But this is Friday's reporting of what's happening in the market. And this is really, really kind of an interesting thing and a sign of the times what can go on in the markets. Meta, Meta, which is the parent of Facebook and Twitter and and Zuckerberg. Anyway, Meta's plunge rattles lofty tech shares. Now, the Meta's plunge was 230 billion in valuation. From somewhere around 320 something per share to down to 240 per share. So here is the, I'm going to put that up here so it can be seen on the video. I'm right behind there. And that's big. That's big. One thing that I did forget to mention earlier is that there was an article also in there that I took note of, and that is that China is fortifying its borders. So they're building, fences on their southern border, which, borders Myanmar, Korea, and all those. And they're saying, oh, we need a fence, because of COVID. Okay. And China basically claims that COVID is like a nothing burger because they're so diligent about it, And but, the statistics coming out of China is whatever they create, Yeah, so, just recently, Marge and I were listening to the news and reflecting on what is being said about January 6th in the news. And, all of the media, is saying, how the country was in danger, and, we were about to lose our democracy. And this is what's going on in the mainstream media almost daily here throughout all of the month of January, because there's the January 6th Commission that has a couple of Republicans on it. That was supposed to be a bipartisan commission, and that just didn't happen because Nancy Pelosi, just did not want the Republicans on the committee, and so it's now a partisan committee, and they're going to come out with something. And of course, they have the power for subpoena and whatnot, so they can say just about everything. What's really interesting about this is that this is called so the Republicans, I have to start from scratch on this a little bit, because the Republicans came out with a statement, and I think it's kind of a platform statement in a way, a significant statement that January 6th incident, was a result of political discourse, and people, were unhappy with the results of the election and so forth. And not one word is mentioned about 2020 and the BLM riots. The BLM riots, which had us all on edge. They're burning stores, people got killed, And in Seattle, the chop zone, it went on for months. And Antifa, was smashing storefronts. Looting, people were walking off with Nike stuff, It's really kind of... Anyway, so, and every day you would see this on TV. Now, at the time, the Democrats in charge of Seattle and other places, they just, just kind of let it happen. Los Angeles and Long Beach, and so forth, they just thought it was okay, because this was political discourse, people expressing their opinions, Not a frickin' word is mentioned about that right now, because at that time, it was basically like an anti-Trump protest, So if they can't accept that January 6th was a political discourse, they shouldn't accept the fact that all the riots, which caused a lot of bloodshed, two people died, one of a heart attack, one was actually shot by a cop. I don't know how many people died in the riots, but it was certainly more than one. And cops are still being shot because of, the support for BLM, which all comes from the Democrats. And this is really disheartening because, California is a sanctuary state, and there's some other sanctuary states. And what does this mean? Is first of all that they tolerate illegal immigration. They tolerate a certain amount of crime. For instance, $950 worth of stuff you can just walk out of the store with. That's fine. And then if you get caught with anything, some sort of a crime, unless it's the very most heinous, perhaps, I'm not sure that even that, they let you go again. So
because
that's
of
what's
no
going
bail.
on. Yeah, no bail,
Because it discriminates against people who are poor.
Yeah. So, and that's their reasoning, is that it discriminates against people who are poor. But, so you let these criminals out to do that all over again. We need a change in government, especially in some of the states, like California, for sure.
It didn't happen in Orange County because the Bloomingdales had police shoulder to shoulder all the way around the Bloomingdales.
Really?
When the riots were going on.
Yeah.
Security guards. I don't know that it was police per se, but they had bouncer types.
Yeah. Well, they tried to do this in small towns like Huntington Beach as well. And, Antifa was laying around bricks and axes and stuff like this, and people were looking for that, and they found them, and so they, some people in the cities, formed committees, and they brought arms, and so they were protecting their, it wasn't only Koreans on the rooftops, Anyway, so, but my point really is that it seems like the democratic governments, seem to tolerate this kind of stuff. So
unless it comes from Republicans.
What?
Unless it comes from Republicans.
Yeah. So if the Republicans say, well, if the Republicans go in and express their displeasure, which, by the way, I don't condone, all that rioting that happened on the January 6th, but let's treat everything equally. Let's treat everything equally. You can't have it just one way.
That's right.
All right. Well, I think that's just about enough. But actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about my career in the machine shops, because the last machine shop video, I told you how the different sections of the machine shop and the processing sections, had the more skilled and the less skilled and so forth, and it also went to with the for supervisors. And so at U.S. Steel, I started to rise through the ranks, of that process, starting with lathe operators, and I had some of the drill press guys in there too. And, the screw machine operators, and then more to the large hobbing machines, and then vertical turret lathes and so forth. And then milling machines, and of course the top ones were the horizontal boring mills, that contained the really, really important work. If you started, on a large casting in the wrong place and did not have enough material left over, to finish what needed to be done on there, it couldn't be added. The whole thing needed to be scrapped. So thousands of dollars were down the tubes, and that's why these guys were more highly paid and highly skilled, and then they had the right supervisors too. So if you came from the milling section, with the horizontal boring mills, and you were recognized as, a foreman that has already advanced some, so you had higher status. And then ultimately, I graduated to the assembly floor. This is when I actually left U.S. Steel, and I spent 6 years at U.S. Steel. So at the assembly floor, I, there you're, of course you're, this is where the rubber meets the road. The stuff that was produced elsewhere, either fits or doesn't fit, and then you have to figure out if it doesn't fit. A lot of times it doesn't. I have to figure out what you're going to do. What happens next. And once you graduated to the assembly floor, you were also eligible to take your turn as a graveyard foreman. And that means, in the middle of the graveyard shift, you were in charge of everything. And you had to make sure that everything was set up for the first shift, day shift to come in. And the day shift, had, hundreds of people. The other shifts, had, like dozens of people, 20, 30, maybe. And the night shift had, even less. But that meant that you were involved in all of the processes all the time. Anyway, so not only did I learn the machining trade in Germany, then I became a supervisor at U.S. Steel. That was after I served some time as a what they call engineer of operating practices. So I had to build procedures, and if there was particular problems that had to be solved, they'd call the engineer of operating practice and say, well, okay, make the decision of how it's going to be done or not done. Anyway, but it was kind of a training, kind of a training position. And then when they took me in as a foreman, a supervisor, that was a big deal. So, and all along I got more money. So what did I do? I left U.S. Steel, this wonderful job, and I had a very, very good reputation there because the CEO, the plant manager, interviewed me, called me in. What the hell was his name? Herschel something. He called me in. He says, "Krieger, why do you want to leave? From all you can tell, is you're an up and coming star here, and it sounds like to me like you just want to move to California." I said, "Well, pretty much so. That's what I want to do." "Well, we have a plant in California, Torrance, California. There was a U.S. Steel plant. Do you want a job there? We'll give you a job there." I said, "Well, I already accepted the work at Kaiser Steel, so I came." That was in 1969. Yeah. Anyway, so I came to Kaiser Steel and became foreman in the forge and weld shop. Of course, I didn't know that much about welding, but boy, did I learn fast. So that really rounded out my education. When it comes to industrial supervision, and ultimately, at Kaiser Steel, I rose to general foreman of maintenance, mechanical maintenance. So anything in the tin mill that was mechanical maintenance, that was under my purview, and all of the machinery that goes with it. So, and then they decided to shut down Kaiser Steel. I had to look for a job. So somebody says, "Well, Edison is looking for somebody." So I went to the Edison company, and they hired me as the supervisor of plant maintenance for Laughlin power plant called Mojave Generating Station. So I became the supervisor of that. And that was an adventure all by itself because, I spent about 4, maybe 5 years there. But holy smokes, I went through all kinds of stuff. A locker search, a big pipe explosion. We had the plant down, oh man, it was a disaster. But Mojave Generating Station, you can Google that and, talk about asbestos abatement, pipe explosions. If you Google that, you'll read about everything that I had to do and deal with, because the pipe explosion happened while I was in charge of maintenance. Okay, so that was a little of a dicey situation. But then I was promoted to the Rosemead office in charge of I think they called it I don't know. Can't remember that right now.
Wasn't it hydro engineer?
No, that came a little bit later. So I was promoted to it was called power plant technology or something, because the turbine engineers reported to me, and the people that did all of the time study stuff and so forth. But then I interviewed and I got a job with Edison Hydro, and I became chief hydro engineer. I spent
that was a big deal.
Yeah, that was a big deal. So I was chief hydro engineer. There was all of the hydroelectric plants, I had to sign off on all the whatever was done there, in terms of changes and so forth. And we were smack in the middle of changing the efficiency of our Pelton wheel generators. Some new developments have been made, through computer-aided design, And so we kept increasing the efficiency of these things. And it was really a tough one because some of those plants were over 70 years old, and so we had the State Historical Society, had to be informed as to what extent we couldn't change anything, for instance, It was really an adventure. And well, that was also the time that I met my new wife, Marge. Went through divorce and met my wife, Marge, and we're now here. At this moment, we're like, 32 years married? So it's been good. One son. It's good. Good times. But one day while I was chief hydro engineer, the superintendent of power generation came, or manager of power generation came to me. He says, Krieger, how would you like to, we're thinking about making some changes. Would you like to run a machine shop? And I said, yeah, well, that's exactly right down my alley, So then, so I became manager of the Westminster machine shop. That was a neat job, lush budget I think the budget was right around $15 million, which back in the 90s was still a lot of money, So yeah, I'm a machinist through and through, So all the way till retirement in 1995, and then after that, I really got to design machines, and it's because I represented a company called In Place Machining, and I was the engineer that built some machines to do some specialty field machining jobs. Oh, you basically have the story of my career right now, and the video is 32 minutes long. My goodness. And I think this is long enough, and I want to thank you, Marge, for being here. Kind of, it's good to have another human sitting there because, not just looking at the camera. Anyway, I want to bid you farewell, Auf Wiedersehen, and may we infect the universe with us.